If you're a nonprofit CEO, founder, or operations lead, you are in exactly the right place today. We're diving into a massive and honestly fascinating new data report that serves as a mirror for what's really going on inside your organization. In this explainer, we're cutting straight to the hidden mechanics of how your operations actually stay afloat. And I promise you, by the time we wrap up, you're going to view the stability of your own organization in a completely different light. Okay, let's get right to it. I want you to ask yourself a really honest question right off the bat. How is your organization actually holding together right now? Like, are your day-to-day operations running smoothly because they were designed that way? Or, if you look just a little closer, are they secretly held together by manual admin, duct tape fixes, and just sheer staff memory? It's a tough question, I know, but it's exactly what we're tackling today. Okay, let's unpack this, because to the outside world, your funders, your board, your community, your nonprofit probably looks highly functional. Services are getting delivered, the reports are filed, and the mission is moving forward. It looks like you have completely stable services. But on the inside, well, the reality is usually a totally different story. That inside reality is absolutely full of messy processes, scattered data, and just constant workarounds. The work is getting done, for sure, but it is literally being carried by hand. The system isn't supporting the staff. The staff are carrying the system on their backs. So let's move into what the data actually says. We analyzed over 5,700 peer conversations to see what professionals just like you are saying behind closed doors. We're going to do 3 rapid analysis rounds here. Round 1 looks at what actually gets discussed, and overwhelmingly, 85% of these folks aren't sitting around debating big-picture sector philosophy or 5-year strategies. Nope, near-term practical advice totally dominates. They are desperately looking for ways to solve immediate problems today. They're trying to figure out how to prep a last-minute report, how to stop important commitments from falling through the cracks, or how to deal with unclear handoffs between teams. The daily demand is just entirely practical. Moving to round 2, we look at how problems are handled. Now, when things get really tough, you might expect to see a lot of panic, right? But the data reveals something incredible. 94% of the time, professionals describe the pressure they're facing as contained or strained, rather than completely collapsing. People aren't giving up. They're actively managing the friction. They're white-knuckling it and keeping the wheels on the bus, even when the road gets incredibly bumpy. And here's the kicker. Individual responsibility is what carries that load. 80% of the time, the focus is entirely on what the individual themselves must do next to protect the service. Rather than pushing the problem up the chain to leadership or blaming external factors, your staff are internalizing the pressure. They're quietly asking themselves, okay, what manual admin do I personally need to do right this second to make sure this whole thing doesn't fail? Which brings us to how these constraints are handled on a day-to-day basis. What exactly happens when your team hits a wall or realizes a process is just clearly broken? This is honestly the most staggering ratio in the entire report, 19-1. For every one single time a constraint is actively challenged or pushed back on, your staff simply accepts or accommodates it 19 times. Just let that sink in for a second. They see the limits. They know the spreadsheets are a nightmare. They know the data is a mess. But instead of redesigning the process, they just rely on workarounds 19 times out of 20. So all of this data points to a massive paradigm shift in how we need to view stability in the nonprofit sector. We really need to name this massive structure sitting just below the waterline. We call this the default adjustment operating mode. It's basically a system dynamic where constraints are routinely absorbed through local adaptation rather than being escalated or redesigned. What does that mean in plain English? It means stability in your organization isn't normal. Your system only looks stable because your people just keep making continuous, quiet, local adjustments to make it work. They're the ones bridging the gaps every single day. This constant adaptation acts as your invisible continuity mechanism. Your staff are literally acting as human shock absorbers, quietly taking on the friction of messy processes without you ever even seeing it. Because they fix it locally, the crisis never actually reaches your desk. The funding report gets submitted, payroll goes out, the client gets served to you. It simply appears as an organization doing its job. But the reality is, it is entirely dependent on staff carrying that load by hand. So, what's the cost of this invisible strain? And what does it mean for you as a leader? Because you absolutely need to understand that this continuous local adjustment, it isn't free. It comes at a steep, steep price. Still functioning is absolutely not the same thing as working well. This contrast brilliantly illustrates the danger here. As a leader, you see the stable outputs. You see reliable delivery, reports are filed, clients are happy. But because these daily adjustments are totally invisible to you, you miss the hidden staff load building up behind the scenes. The structural friction of your organization isn't gone. It's simply being masked and converted straight into human exhaustion. Look, long before a service ever actually fails in front of a funder, this hidden strain is going to show up internally. It shows up as chronic busyness, or people are just constantly chasing down basic information. It shows up as unclear handoffs between your finance and program teams. It shows up in temporary workarounds just magically become your standard operating procedure. Eventually, people drowning in messy processes and relying entirely on staff memory leads directly to extreme fatigue and a massive retention risk. Your absolute best people will leave simply because the work is just too hard to run. Okay, so what can you as a leader do next? The good news here is that breaking out of this mode doesn't require hitting the panic button or buying some massive, expensive new software that takes a year to figure out. Your goal is actually incredibly simple. Make the work easier to run. That's it. Your goal shouldn't be to overhaul your entire organization at once. Your goal is simply to fix the scattered data, reduce the repeated manual tasks, and untangle the workflows that are constantly getting in the way of the important work you're already doing. Do not add more complexity. Just remove the friction. Instead of adding layers of complexity, I want you to follow these 3 actionable steps. Step 1, just pause. The biggest enemy of a smoother organization is the quiet reflex of saying, we'll just keep making this work for now. Pausing breaks that habit. It stops you from rushing out to shop for a shiny new technology solution before you have actually diagnosed the real issue. It gives you the space to look at the process instead of just reacting to the latest operational emergency. Step 2, review what your team is repeatedly working around. Sit down with your staff and ask a very specific question. What parts of your day-to-day job do you absolutely dread or dislike? Don't just look at performance metrics to see if a report was filed on time. Look closely at where their daily effort is actually going. Find the exact places where they are losing hours chasing down people, copying and pasting numbers across spreadsheets, or double handling data just to keep things moving. And step 3, fix those messy processes by mapping them out first. Do not jump straight to technology. Grab a whiteboard or a blank piece of paper and literally draw the workflow. Track how information moves from one person to another. Find where the handoffs break down, where things get stuck waiting for approval, or where the entire process relies completely on one person's memory. Untangle the mess and clear up the ownership on paper first. Once the process makes sense, then, and only then, can you look at the tools to support it.
I want to leave you with this final thought. What is your team quietly working around today? Seriously, what friction are they absorbing right now so that you don't have to see it? Go ask them. Find the manual admin, find the scattered data, and start making the work easier to run. I encourage you to go have that conversation with your team today. And if you have that conversation and realize the setup is just too tangled, or you're not sure what to fix first, come speak to us. We help nonprofits map the mess, untangle your workflows on paper, and find a practical, stress-free next step forward. Feel free to reach out to us directly, and let's make the work easier to run. Thank you so much for watching.